Okay, let's start. I have been having so much fun with Old Men Stories and the club around it. And do you know the first two members that were there, besides me, were Rodney Zantz, who was 144th in his class out of 144 at Pelican, and Adele, a woman, at my Old Men Storiy. So it was the first two, and we just had a ball. Absolutely had a ball, and we sat and we told old men stories and old women's stories. And last night Adele came over to the house and we sat and we told old people's stories, old men's stories. I says, this is so much fun. And I says, what would be one of your greatest objectives if you're doing it? I said, well, one of them would be to have an old men's story in every town in the country. But that didn't stop me. I said, well, how are you going to set up the path? If anyone knows the path you have when you set up websites, you have like so-and-so.com/ Well, I says, how are we going to do it? I says, well, first of all, we'd have to identify the country. Because first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have them set up one in my India office. And I got some people in Africa that I'm going to set one up at. And I says, wow, so you need a country. So the first two letters would be the country. Then the state, or sub-country. And then the city. And then a subtitle if you have more than one in the city. I says, oh, but that's not what I really want. What I want is something in front of that. I want an E underline. Now, what does that mean? An E underline. Anyone guess? Earth. Oh. Because the second one that I would love to see is an M underline for the moon or Mars. Wouldn't that be cool to have an old men's story or people bringing stories back? Wow. Now that's an objective. That is something that would be really fun. Or an old woman's story from where? From Mars or the moon. Jeez. I'm just absolutely thrilled at being able to participate in this. And I've done it. Oh, absolutely what I in my mind. But I find that with us humans, that's where it all starts, doesn't it? All the stories, all the fun starts in our minds. We have an optimism that permeates our being. And we have a sense of humor that when we really get everything stressed, we laugh at it all. It's a beautiful trait. I think it's one of the things that, of all the things I cherish about humans, that's the two. We laugh at it. Okay. We laugh at it. And we always, as a general rule, optimize and look at stuff from a positive point of view. When things are all going great, what do? We go the opposite direction. But when things are rough, we go that direction. And in life, that's where I want to bring this organization. I want to see it go there. I want to see a spot where we emphasize telling stories about the beautiful things that happen in life through tragedy. Because if you don't have a contrast, there isn't a story. And I'd like people to learn how to tell stories so that when they get up there, people listen. Now, people every day right now spend 90% of their time sometimes listening to stories. Where? TV, right? And we've got, what, about 10, 20 different major type things that tell us stories. So we sit passively as humans and watch a few people tell us stories. Now, everything has its cycle and everything has its life. And I think this passive area, because it is so new and exciting, of just going in and sitting there watching TV, is sort of wearing out. And the biggest change that happens in our lifetimes is when we're what? We're bored. And this is happening now. And it's now time for us to go out and create our own stories and learn how to tell them. Well, this is why I want all of us to go out and recruit people to learn how to tell stories. To get joy from telling stories, to tell them all different kinds of ways. And Elaine, you could sit and give a class on introductions to stories. You have the bring in the path type story, and bring in a exciting situation story, bring in a picturesque thing that's bringing a story. Different things that have stories. When you, all of the same things you were doing with Toastmasters almost directly apply to stories. Almost directly. Because it's stories that move people. And if you can tell a story about your business, if you can tell a story about your life, that will change how people think. Okay? Elaine had a story about her position on flood. By the way, we live in a floodplain in Minneapolis, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I used to go over to the park and we would swim when the flood happened. And you'd have these brown things floating by you. Everyone knows what that is, but when we were kids, we just lived it, we didn't know. But we learn and we get stories. And telling little snippets or vignettes of stories are what I envision of doing this. And I would love someone to call from the moon and say, this is an old man story from the moon. And record it under our club. Now, I'll just pass on a short old man story that's an old man story. Last year I went to the dermatologist. And there were these young nurses walking in and out, and Terry, my wife, was sitting over in the corner. And I quietly said to the dermatologist, I said, Gorsolowski? I says, I got a problem. That's his name. I says, I need some Cialis. And he says, no one was in there. And Terry can't hear very well. So he walks over and he turns around. The two pretty nurses walked in and Terry was saying, oh, you want some Cialis, huh? I says, yes. And Terry says, yeah, that guy's really busy. And everyone in the room started laughing. Oh, I says, oh. I said, well, that should end it. I says, so he says, I'll handle it, Roland. He says, I'll give you a daily one, prescription. I says, oh. I said, thanks. So I went down to the pharmacy, and he had another thing for my head and had the Cialis. So I stuck the Cialis underneath, and I quietly gave it to the lady. I was in this line. There's a bunch of ladies behind me. I gave it to the lady, and I says, have you got it? I said, I'm going to go now. I started walking away. I got about 10 feet. And these ladies were giving this smirk smile. I walked back over because she, you know, I just because I says, how can I get even with this lady for picking on me? So I said, I turned around and I says, well, what am I going to do tonight then? She looks at me without breaking a smile and says, sir, aisle 7, books and magazines.
Oh, jeez.
Thank you.